devil is amongst us. Stay back, boy. This calls for divine intervention. I kick ass for the Lord.
Welcome to Heresy and Hearsay, a podcast to reclaim faith in the context of political discussion. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on Twitter at SethrothII. And you can follow the show on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and any podcast catcher. Just look for Heresy and Hearsay. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow us. Also give us a review that helps others find us. I will be doing this solo, but as always, you can find my partner and better half of the show, September, on Twitch and Twitter at 9of12. That's NINEOF12. Again, that's NINEOF12. And you can also hear her on the Geek Girls podcast. Heresy and Hearsay has a Patreon website where you can find us. That's patreon.com/heresy and hearsay, where you can visit us and support us. Just $2 a month goes a long way to help support this humble show. When we're live, you can also contribute bits in Twitch, or you can subscribe for free or pay for the subscription by using Amazon Prime for the free subscription, or it's a small price for the subscription on a monthly basis, and we would greatly appreciate any support. So today is going to be kind of a news day. We're going to cover a couple of topics, basically the two big topics that are engulfing the nation right now, and I wanted to cover them tonight. As I said in the opening, I am doing this solo. Right now, September is at a Democratic meeting. So, you know, she's doing the part that she's supposed to be doing, that she does well. So that will, you know, at the local level. And so that's going to be important and helpful for November when that comes around. She is always an important asset, even if she is there only briefly. Her wisdom as far as policies and as far as the minutia of how to get votes and everything else is extremely helpful to anyone who has her in their midst. So I think that's extremely important, and I'm glad that she's helping out where she can. Now, and she did say the last time we were together that she was trying to get out of politics, and it's that Godfather 3 thing. Just as I thought I'm out, they just bring me back in. It's one of those situations for her. But so let's talk about the non-political news. I am not going to make this political. I'm not going to bash any administrations or anything like that. I think this is too important. What funding and stuff has gone where and everything else, that's all been taken care of by other major news outlets, and it's gotten political to a scary degree on both sides. And the problem with it becoming that way is that then the real problem is kind of put in that political sphere, and then it becomes extremely problematic. And I'm, of course, talking about the coronavirus. Right now, as of today, which is, I'm recording on the 10th, and as of right now, there's over 600 cases reported in the United States. There's about a little over 1.5 million test kits that have currently been issued out. And right now it seems like it's going to spread more, and that's a little scary. I don't like to be alarmist about that, but there has been some reported cases in large gatherings that could cause especially large gatherings of like communities that then would spread out to other states and things like that. That could definitely be a problematic, and could cause it to spread. Before the incubation period is between 1 and 14 days from what the CDC has said. It's normally within 5, which means that you can have it and be contagious at that point and pass it on before you even realize you yourself have it. And it kind of goes like a chain letter. What's interesting, and I do want to point this out, someone, Stephen King stated in one of his tweets that no, the coronavirus isn't like the virus in The Stand. This is not the Stand. Everybody relax. And then someone tweeted back to him and said, "How do you know? Have you even read the book?" And it hurt me a lot. Because I figured he probably read it several times. He bloody wrote it. But it's a little bit of humor on the situation. But the thing is that right now, my biggest concern is there's not communicability rates listed that I could find. That's not saying that's a bad thing, but I have a feeling that it's probably be as communicable as the flu. Because it's a virus, it spreads fairly rapidly in communities and everything else. And those who are more susceptible to the virus, more susceptible to colds and flus, are more likely to be able to get it in a community that has the coronavirus in its community. And the more, it's a reverse of herd immunity. So herd immunity basically is if 90% of the people are immune to something, then those who can't, for whatever reason, and this is talking about vaccinations, those people who can't have vaccinations are typically more likely to not get it either, because the rest of the individuals aren't going to get it, and therefore spread it to those individuals who can't have that. I just said it and I've lost it. I'm sorry, guys. That vaccination. Now, so it's kind of reverse is true. The more people that have it, those people that are more susceptible will be more likely to get it than those that aren't. New York Times posted an article of things to avoid and stuff like that. There are a lot of nursing homes and assisted living centers that are basically saying, look, call your relatives, send them letters, stuff like that, be mindful, stay in contact, but don't come and visit right now. It's too dangerous. Especially the elderly and stuff are more likely to get it. And because of their weakened immune systems for one reason or another, they are more likely to not do as well with recovery. Most people can make a recovery. Now, here's the thing, there is a misunderstanding about this. The flu virus has a mortality rate of 0.1%, meaning that out of 1,000 people that get the virus, one person dies. Okay. Right now, the World Health Organization is putting it at 3.4% for the coronavirus. So what that means is that out of 100 people, so we're already talking a smaller margin, 3 people die. I'm not giving a fourth of a person. That's weird. Or 0.4 of a person. But so that's the representation I want to understand. One person out of 1,000 versus 3 people out of 100 is a larger difference. So it is a little more scarier. It can affect people who have certain conditions, people who are younger, people with a weaker, with their immune systems aren't as strong. Older people, their immune systems aren't as strong. People with respiratory issues, such as asthma and stuff, may be more susceptible and have to be looked after a little bit more. I'm not, by no stretch of the imagination, I'm not saying if you're an asthmatic and you happen to catch this, that you're going to, oh God, I'm going, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you need to take extra precautions. You need to be more watched and everything else. Because in certain circumstances, I do believe this would probably turn into like a pneumonia or something like that. So you have to be careful. Best things to do, as they've been saying over and over again, wash your hands up to your wrists. I typically, when especially when these kind of things go on, but when I'm in public places and stuff, I typically do the surgeon wash. I wash up to like mid forearm. That's just me because I'm weird, but yeah, do at least up to to just past your wrists. Make sure you get in between your fingers, and in between your, and everything else. Make sure your fingernails are cleaned and everything else. 20 seconds. It's the happy birthday song twice, or ABC, or, hum a song, do something, count the 20 doing one Mississippi's, but wash your hands, making sure it's with good soap and water. I also understand that a lot of public restrooms don't allow you to control the heat of the water, and that's a problem in its own right. Do the best you can. Hand sanitizers help somewhat, as long as it's an alcohol-based tizer. Also, someone else pointed this out, and it's a very good thing. Make sure you moisturize, because this stuff will dry you out, especially alcohol type stuff. And then if you have cracked, dry skin, it can get in there as well. So you just have to be careful. Cover your mouth. If you have a cough, it may not, I have a cough occasionally. It's sinuses or whatever. It's not the coronavirus, because I don't have the other symptoms of a fever or a headache. Well, I always have a headache, but it's not a fever kind of situation. So, I still, and use the crux of your elbow. I'm sorry, I did that as a visual while I was saying it. Use the crutch of your elbow, not your hands. Make sure to avoid eye contact, your hands to your face, which I have discovered is really hard. But as long as you are washing your hands and stuff like that and everything else, being extra careful. Do you need a mask? Not right at this moment, no. If you're sick, yes, get a mask. Just make sure you change it often and everything else. Don't hoard masks. It's not necessary right now. Could this turn into a pandemic? It's a possibility. It depends on exactly what happens in the next 2 to 3 months. I know that people are terrified of this. The stock market is not doing well with this at all. They're freaking out and everything else. I will say this about the financial markets as a whole. They've been on a big high for quite a while with very little correction. In some respects, sometimes a little scare will actually correct the markets a little bit, and I would not be overly concerned. Sometimes the markets need a little bit of this scare to correct them, and then they'll be fine. I don't think we're in, as long as everything is going fine as far as the rest of the economy, I don't think you're going to have to worry about the stock market if you have 401ks or anything like that right now. Again, let's see what the next 2 to 3 months brings as far as the coronavirus and how it spreads and everything else, and how it's handled, and how trained the doctors are, how trained medical facilities can handle it, and everything else, because that is extremely important. That will be the biggest crutch of this whole situation is how prepared they are and everything else. And the questions are, what about a vaccine? Vaccines won't be ready for another 18 months to 2 years at most, because it takes a while to come up with a virus. It takes a while to come up with a vaccine. It takes quite a while for that to happen. And, don't get your news from Twitter. And honestly, don't. Best places to go: CDC or the World Health Organization. I know I can speak, to get information about what to do, best practices, things like that. Get your sources from there. Get your sources from reputable places that can give you information about the disease. Right now, like I said, and I'm going to be posting show notes of in the show notes. I'm going to be posting some of the things that they've been talking about today as far as closures and stuff in the New York Times, and I'm also going to be talking about, and I'll also post the stuff about the CDC and the World Health Organization as well, in the show notes, that you'll be able to see on YouTube as well as in the podcast notes as well. So you'll be able to see that, and be able to bookmark those or keep that tab so you can refresh it every so often, and it will give you a lot of good information, a lot of good updates on that kind of stuff. Because right now, my biggest concern is this has become a football, a political football, and people are unfortunately treating this somewhat like the climate crisis in some respects. It's getting to the point where it's being treated like that, where it's where we're people are. It's that meme of the cat and the woman and the cat. They're screaming at each other, and the problem is that the information is wrong. Yes, is there fumbles going on in the administration? Yes, I will be the first to admit that, and I would love to go off on a rant on that, but that doesn't help. Not right now. We can discuss it after, and make sure that we get as many people healthy and keep them healthy and keep people safe. And once this is over, then we can have that discussion. I am one of these people. I don't think it's time for that discussion right now. I think what the time is right now is to get the information out, get the proper information out. If one side is not giving the proper information, just give the proper information. It's like, this is the information. Don't call people liars. Don't say that they screwed up because they fired so and so, or did what's this, that, and the other, or they removed funding from this and that. Just simply give out the proper information. It's like, this is the proper information you need to know about the virus and what's going on right now. This is what is going on. This is what the World Health Organization is saying. This is what the CDC is saying. This is what you need to know. This is what you need to deal with it. That's what needs to be done on the other side. Finger pointing and stuff can come later. Like I said, after we've dealt with this, and it may not be the pandemic it could be. Is it as bad as certain other pandemics? Possibly. It could be the 1914 the flu of the early 19th century, 1900s. It could also, it could be like SARS, stuff like that. You just have to, it could be like swine flu, things like that. You have to be careful. There's a YouTuber I follow. She was talking about, and she's from Scotland, she was talking about how she had gotten the swine flu, and she doesn't, and now she has to have an inhaler, not because she's gotten asthma, but because it scarred her lungs bad, that she now has to use inhaler. So you have to be careful, and I want you to have the proper information. So that's why I wanted to come to you with a calm understanding that, like I said, I could come at and I could just go to town about all the mistakes that have been made. Not right now. Like I said, let's make sure that we get through this and that we help each other. Right now, there's a lot of things up in the air. I am a wrestling fan, for example. WrestleMania is less than a month away. Should they have WrestleMania? I don't know. it was a big childhood dream of mine and my brother's to go and see WrestleMania, and we saw it, and it was a big joy. We got to see several of our favorite wrestlers, still technically in their prime. Some of them, we got to see some of them that right before they had to retire for injury purposes. We also got to see some things that was not that great, but overall, there you go. So I don't know. I really don't. There are conventions that are still going on. I know they're still talking about doing San Diego Comic-Con. That's like 100,000 people in one place, traveling from all over the world. I don't know. I can't answer that. Not right now. Not with the limited information and the limited testing that's been currently done. Here's my best suggestion. If you can skip it, skip it. There's always next year. I know that means that you may lose money on whatever that you've paid money for. But prudence is probably the best in this situation. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people in one place, and not I've been to conventions. I've been to very large conventions, and I've been to small conventions. And not everybody is sanitary, and that can be a problem. I'm not saying the vast majority of people aren't sanitary, but it only takes a couple, and if you're in a confined small space, people are talking about things much further out, like Dragon Con, which is another one, which is huge here in the Southeast, may not happen, and that may need to be. So, like I said, conventions, big concerts, everything else, Coachella, stuff like that. You may want to avoid those right now and wait until the following year and see what happens. That's what I can say right now about that. So yeah, that may be something you need to think about. All right. So I've been enough doom and gloom and expecting the Mad Max, end of the world kind of thing. No, I'm just kidding. That's not going to happen. But Monday was Monday, and today is a full moon. We're still in retrograde for those who believe in Mercury retrograde, and Friday is the 13th. I'm not looking for this week is not being a good week for anybody. I'm just saying. Speaking of not a good week for anybody, as of time of recording, it's not looking good for Bernie Sanders. Bernie, who did very well in Michigan last year, especially with white college educated and with non-college educated whites, didn't do well this time in Michigan and lost Michigan. Right now, it looks like Biden is going to be the nominee. There's not the pathway to Bernie winning the nomination narrows dramatically at this point because there's only maybe two more large states that are up. New York, I don't think is voted yet, if I'm not mistaken. And New York hasn't voted yet, and I don't think Texas has voted. I'm trying to think if there's another possible large state. Florida hasn't voted yet. Those two may do something, but here's the thing: if Biden gets a lot of the smaller states, it kind of counteracts that a little bit, which is what Biden's doing. Though Michigan is a big get, right now, and Texas was the surprise, especially with the Hispanic voters, that Bernie did really well with in Nevada. I did this on Facebook, on my personal Facebook page, and I will say this now. I'm calling it already. I know it's March, but early March, and like I said, there are some pathways, but they are small at this point for Sanders to possibly squeak this out. I just don't see it. I don't at this point, and here's why. I have 3 reasons why I don't see this happening. First off, and right now, what is the big thing is minority voters, especially black voters. And they are traditionally more, I don't want to say conservative liberals, but they are more traditional Democratic voters than they are progressive voters, which that needs to change, and I'm going to discuss some things here later about certain things about that. But that tends to be that they tend to be more of a conservative Democratic voter, not I don't want to say centrist or more. I don't even want to say centrist. That comes off, but they tend to be more party centric versus outliers such as Sanders or whatever. The second is the youth vote, and I discussed this last time when I was, yelling at Sanders voters, especially that the youth isn't coming out. Sanders focused a lot of his energy on the youth vote, which is fine, except historically, the youth between 18 and 25 typically don't come out. They don't. One of the reasons for those who are young or whatever that may not, and I'm young too, this was before my time, but I do know it through the history and stuff because it was fairly new. The reason why 18-year-olds got to start voting was because of Vietnam, because of the draft. There was such a large draft in Vietnam, and 18 to 20-year-olds couldn't vote, but they could go and be drafted and go and fight in a war and die in Vietnam. So there was this huge push, and that was eventually changed to where they could vote. The problem is that, and this goes back to even when I was 18. I voted, my first election was 1992, and I voted for Clinton then. And since then, I have, I've voted, I've missed 1 or 2 primaries and no elections that I'm eligible to vote for. Now, where I live currently, I can't vote for city elections, but I can vote for county. So that's why I can only vote every 2 years instead of every year. But that being said, a lot of youth don't vote. I remember, like I said, I remember MTV pushing very hard about this, and I hate to keep beating a dead horse about this, but the youth don't come out and vote. And if you focus a lot of the energy, you can try, and you may nudge that needle some, but it's just historic that it doesn't happen, that they don't come out and vote. They're not energized for whatever. I don't know what it is. I can't explain it. I wished I could say it was like, because social media now, they get these things where they think, oh, it's a shoe-in, they're not going to go in. I don't think that's the case, because when like I said, when I voted in 92, it wasn't a shoe-in then. So it's, it's not going, or I should say, there was no social media back then. There was no real internet back then, not like it is now. There sure as hell wasn't a Facebook or a Twitter or anything like that. I don't even think there was a MySpace back then. Oh yeah, there's a Flash. Anyways, so I don't see that. You see what I'm saying? I don't see. It's not social media per se. Now, I know that a lot of people are upset that Elizabeth Warren didn't go ahead and back Bernie Sanders as soon as she got out. I can understand why she didn't. I can understand that there is a lot of animosity and stuff like that. I also, and this is a hunch and a suspicion, and I have this gut feeling, and here that she has been discussing things, and this is something that I brought up with September, and I still think this, that I think she's going to be Biden's running mate. I don't know what that's going to do. I don't. At this point, I really don't. It may tick off enough of the Bernie supporters that they break off. But here's the difference from 2016. First off, Hillary was a target on her for so long. I mean, ever since Bill got into office, the Clintons have been attacked constantly by the GOP for one reason or another. I mean, you can just look at all the controversies that came up throughout their time in offices together and everything else, what they tried to do, and the Republican Party as a whole and everything, and what they attempted to do and all this stuff. And how it basically affected everything, and how they were treated, and all of this kind of stuff. So it's one of those situations where 30 years of this buildup made her already a weakened candidate. So that's part of it. Part of it, she didn't go to Michigan to campaign. She didn't go to Wisconsin to campaign. So she was not a super strong candidate at that point. She was... she wasn't focusing. She was trying to focus on other places instead of shoring up her base, and that turned a lot of people off in a lot of respects as well. And it didn't. You have to, especially because Michigan's still technically a battleground state. Wisconsin's still technically a battleground state. She didn't come in a lot to North Carolina, if I remember correctly. Things like that. Also, and I'm just going to say this out loud, she was a woman. And there's been countries that are more conservative than us that have elected women much sooner. Brazil had a woman prime minister. Margaret Thatcher was in charge. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't great. Was in charge, in the 80s. Merkel. There's been a lot of countries that have elected women into the top position, and yet we can't seem to get over that hump. For whatever reason, Warren, I think, was like a really great candidate, really exciting. She knew her stuff. It's going to have to be somebody who is, and here's my biggest fear and my biggest concern, that there's two. One, I don't think Biden is going to, if Biden does win the primary, which I'm thinking he's going to, and he wins the election, which I'm praying for, then I don't think he's going to stay for 8. Okay, he'll stay for 4, and then the vice president will probably run at that point. My biggest concern and my biggest fear is that the Republicans will get a woman in office before the Democrats do, and that will look crappy, because we're supposed to be the progressives. We're supposed to be the ones that are forward thinking, and the Republicans got a woman in there. So be concerned about that. Be very concerned about that. The other situation is the other thing that Biden has a leg up on is that he's done better with voters that Hillary didn't do so well with. In Michigan, for example, that was one of them, but in several other states as well. Biden has done much better. Here's the thing. Biden is technically still, after 4 years, is still technically riding on the coattails of Obama, and there is still the remnants of that Obama coalition that is still there, and that is propelling him in a lot of ways. And because of that, and because people are just wanting Trump out and not having to deal with this cascade of BS and everything else that has been going on for the past 4 years, and this sure unadulterated terror that, Biden is like, oh, okay, well, he seems safe, at this point, and I think that's going to propel him a great deal. And that's kind of the third point is that there are a lot of people out there that will vote for Biden because he is safe. He is not, Donald Trump, but he is not, going to rock the boat too much like Sanders would, as far as changing so much laws and everything else, or that's what they think. That at that point, they can turn off politics again. They don't have to bother for 2 to 4 years. They can just tune it out. The newscasters can just go back to the same drones about the status quo and all this kind of stuff and everything else, and not be having to deal with all the craziness that's going on. Everybody kind of wants to go back to the status quo. So what do we do? As a progressive, as someone who's like me, a socialist, or if you're a communist, there are people who are out there that are communists, or just a progressive in general, people who are trying to change the world. They're trying to get healthcare for all, trying to get universal healthcare, free college, student debt taken care of, all this kind of stuff. So what do we do? All right. So let's go with the assumption that I've already made that Biden is most likely going to be the nominee. All right. It is March, which is good in a lot of respects. That means that he's not going to be battered throughout the summer, even though I think that Sanders will probably stay in for several more months. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. At that point, I don't think after they'll have the debate on the 17th. It will probably, as far as primaries and stuff goes, it'll probably go through until until the end of the month. And at that point, then it's Illinois. That's the other state I was trying to think of. Sorry, Illinois is also voting on the 17th. So, but depending on if there's a huge win in Illinois and a huge win in Florida and a huge win in New York for Sanders, if that happens, then that may change the race. As it stands right now, at the time of recording, I don't see that happening. It can, but the problem is once people like to back a winner, and when they see someone already in the lead and everything, that does change things. That's why I think the primary, here's my thing, primaries, caucus, all that kind of stuff needs to happen in a short amount of time first. And second off, my second reform, honestly, is that no results are given until all the polls are closed. Not just the polls on the East Coast, but all the polls. If everybody's voting, then everybody can wait. We can wait until California, and everybody, and then start declaring. At that point, we'll know at that point, and some of these other states that have problems counting can know. But as far as the primaries, I think they should be fairly bang, bang, bang. I think there should be a 3-state. First off, I would do a primary restructure. There should be a 3-state primary caucus thing at the beginning, and they should be smaller states, and that should rotate. Why I say smaller states like South Carolina and stuff, Iowa and stuff like that. The reason I say that is because that gets small candidates that don't have a lot of backers and stuff like that. It gets people that like a Yang or like an Elizabeth Warren or a Tulsi Gabbard or whoever else, who, by the way, was on Fox News tonight. And I'm just like, really? She's upset because she's not in the primary. You have no chance of winning. You haven't won a delegate. That's why you're not going to be in the debate. Let's move on. Why are you on Fox News of all places? Jeez. Anyways. But what I'm saying is they would get like a Tulsi Gabbard or somebody else so that they can speak their message and get it out there, in these small states, because the ad buys and stuff are cheaper and everything else, and so it doesn't cost as much money. Campaigning isn't as expensive as a big state. Okay, so and I think they should rotate some. Iowa should just definitely never be first again. That's just prove that you can do a caucus right, a couple of times. Then we may discuss bringing you back. But right now, no, you're done for a while. New Hampshire's probably never going to give it up, neither South Carolina, but you could probably rotate another state in, like put Nevada in Iowa's place. Have it done that way. It's a small state. It doesn't have as huge ad buy situation. Fine. And also, it gets you more diversity. Iowa is 95% white. It doesn't really represent, whereas Nevada does have a more representation. South Carolina is the same way. New Hampshire is also very white, but you can't, get around that. There are certain states that are just a lot of white people. It's just one of those things. Like Wyoming. Only white people would be silly enough to live in Wyoming. I'm just saying. Dick Cheney lives in Wyoming. That's all you need to know. I'm sorry for all those people in Wyoming. I don't mean to disparage. Wyoming is a very pretty country. I just couldn't live there. Because it's also got nothing in it. I'm just saying. Which is probably why you like Wyoming. All right, moving on. Sorry, Wyoming. But so so what do we do? So what do you do? So like I said, April. I'm thinking 1st of April. Basically, it's going to be fully called at that point. There's not going to be more debates or anything like that. Really, you just move on from that point. So you've got several months. Here's the big, because at that point you shift into the general. You as an individual, you as a progressive, if you can't get behind Biden and you can't work for his campaign, I understand. Just vote for him in November. That is non-negotiable. There are children in cages. You vote out the person who put children in cages. That is not negotiable. Okay? But there are things you can do. Go and find your local elections. That is where it's important. September would probably back me up on that point. Local elections are extremely important. Every election is local, and therefore it makes it national. Find your local elections. The Koch brothers, that's one of the things that they've done. That's what they focused on. They focused on small elections like school boards, for all I was saying. And I'm not saying run. You don't have to run because it's time consuming, it's costly. And if you can't do that, that's fine. Find a candidate that agrees with some of your values or all your values. Support them. Be a part of their campaign. Be in their office. Help them get elected. Knock on doors. Be a field agent. Whatever. Go knock on doors. Go and get in the nitty gritty. Shake hands. Well, give the Vulcan hand salute. Go and talk to people. Put flyers out and talk to people. What I'm saying? Do this. This is important. This is very, very important. Do it at the local level. Do it at your city level. If your city is doing anything in the presidential years, a lot of cities like the city that I'm closest to, that I'm technically a part of, but don't get to vote, talk about taxation without representation. But I'm not taxed, so anyways. They do theirs on the off years. They do those. They do it like they did their election last year, kind of thing. But do it at the county level. Do it at the county boards, the county boards, the whatever. Do it at the representative levels. State representatives, state senators, stuff like that. That is going to be a big deal, especially this year. This year is extremely important because it's a census year, meaning that above everything else, we need to get as many of these states flipped blue. Because if we can get these states flipped blue, like my state, for example, if we can get these states flipped blue, maybe we could fix this districting problem that we've been in the courts about for multiple months, multiple years about, because it's been jerry-rigged to hell because of racism. And if we can get that fixed, then, and am I saying that the liberals would not jerry-rig it in their favor too? Probably they will. I don't like that system. where a party chooses it, I think it should be nonpartisan, and I think there really should be a system that's better for it. But right now, at this point, if your state has it to where it is party affiliated, that draws the districts, then at this point, what you need to do is you need to make sure that your elections, that you are involved in the state elections, that you're involved with the state representatives and state senators, and make sure that these are that those people who are progressives, seek them out. If your primaries haven't happened and you got a chance to help them, go and seek those individuals out and go knock on doors and get those people elected, so that into the primaries, and then get them elected. Because it's the local and state levels that is where you build things, because that's where the Democratic Party has built their infrastructure. And if you want to change it, you need to change it, just like I said with the Green Party back in 2016 and everything else. And I'll say it here too. If you're wanting to make change, you have to do it from the small up, from the ground level. And everybody wants to do it from the top. Everybody wants to do it from the presidential level. It doesn't work that way. It never works that way. You have to do it from the ground level. And when you do it from the ground level, you start to build on that ground level, and eventually you can get that top. It takes time, and people don't like taking that time, but that is what is important at this point. If you want a progressive party in the White House, you first have to have a progressive mayor and a progressive state representative, a progressive governor. You have to keep stepping up. You have to have a progressive sheriff, all this kind of stuff. You have to start pushing these local and state elections for that to be of any use. Because if you don't, and if you only go and try to build from the top, it's going to tumble anyways, because you're going to have all these individuals who are not the progressive, and they're just not going to vote for these things. And one of the reasons why, like, the public option was not on the table was partly for the Republicans, but there were also Democrats who were opposed to the public option. If they had more progressives, if they had progressives in those seats, that wouldn't have happened. So the ACA would have had the public option, which would have been another step closer, and that other step would have made it harder at that point for anybody to dismantle it. And it would also made it easier to jump from the single payer option in the ACA to just expanding it completely out, versus what we're having to deal with now. You have to go because if you try to do from the top, it topples over. If you have a good base first, just like any type of building, if you have a strong foundation, then the top will stand. And that's what you need to do. At this point, if you're upset that Sanders is not going to be the president or in the general, I feel for you. I want Elizabeth Warren. I want, free healthcare. I want free college for everybody. I want student loans to be erased. I don't want children to have to pay to eat when they go to school, because that's ridiculous. All right. So I want all of these things. What I don't think would happen is that, or what I don't see happening, is if you get it just at the top and you don't have the foundation first. So you go and you find your local officials and you start working with them and you start building up and you start pushing them if they aren't progressive, and you start pushing and prodding them. You start going to their town halls and you start going to their offices and having discussions with them. Most of your representatives in your district has a local office, normally in a city close to you, and you can go and you can have a nice conversation with them. You can say, hey, what's up? I am a progressive. This is what's going on. Why, why aren't you supporting this? This needs to be supported. Explain your reasoning to me. Do it respectfully, everything. But you can do that throughout. State senators, state representatives, they also have local offices with staff members. Again, be kind, be nice. Ask that, call them up. Calls are important. Letters are more important. Letters. Emails can be, but letters are great too. I have noticed that if I send a letter, I typically get a response from them more than I do if I send an email. Calls also work somewhat. Going to their office also helps a great deal too. But again, be respectful, because you have to. They sign you in a log and everything else, and you are there. And that way, if you don't get to speak with them, they will take your issue, take your concerns, and at that point, they will then bring that to the individuals. September will probably have better insight on this, and I may bring this up to her when we do this next week. I'm hoping she will be able to join us next week. We can do this then. But those are the big things. Look local. Build the foundation. Start building it up. I'm not saying it's going to be immediate, but I'm not going to say it's going to take forever either. It could very easily happen in my lifetime. There are two things that should be happening in my lifetime. One is that we should be back on the moon, and two is that there should be a woman president, a progressive woman president. So, with that being said, I want to thank you for joining us at Heresy and Hearsay. I'm Reverend Barney. You can follow me on Twitter at SethRothII. You can also find the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and podcasts, as well as our website. Just Google us. Don't forget our Patreon, where $2 a month can help keep us going. You can also find my partner on Twitch and Twitter at 9 of 12. Again, that is NINEOF 12. Again, NINEOF 12. You can also hear her on the Geek Growth podcast. And I want to thank you for listening today, and bless your hearts.